Dr. Dana Tassone talking to individuals participating in HFT4295, and the topic of discussion is Chapter 6, called Organizing Resources, Structure, and Systems. This chapter, as is the case with most chapters, builds upon Chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5. Every chapter is a building block and something that we add on to. And we start this chapter discussing something we talked about in Chapter 2, corporate evolution. We talked about management evolution, which dates back to the Industrial Revolution, and we visit that again in this particular chapter so that we can understand why classical managers, which is what we call them, presented their original research on what we call bureaucratic organization. And in this context, bureaucratic's not a bad word like it is today. It was the first opportunity to have large structures, large frameworks, large systems, large organizations, and it required job specialization, spans of management, spans of authority, spans of responsibility, and so this was originated by those researchers at that time. And when we look back on Chapter 3, we recall some of the such things we talked about in terms of organizational design and structure. You already know this, an organizational chart is a representation of the structure of an organization. And within that structure, there are tall organizations and wide organizations. Tall organizations are narrow. Wide organizations are short. So a tall organization will have more narrow span of management. What's a span of management? It's the number of direct reports that are under a specific manager. Again, I want you to think about this, please, as from the perspective of an individual who is responsible for a work unit. It may help to discuss these topics with a work unit manager to give you some insight about those. And a wide span of control would be a larger number of individuals reporting to a specific manager. I'll give you very specific information and examples of that. I show you in Figure 6.3 a sample of a tall organization versus a flat organization, and what makes an organization tall is the layers of management, the number of layers in the management structure. A flatter organization will have fewer layers of management. Flatter organizations permit decisions to be made pretty much by various managers throughout the organization. Tall structures, on the other hand, are very centralized when it comes to decision making. So tall organizations are centralized and flat organizations are decentralized. Next I talk about job design and how it is used to determine the structure of an organization. And then we talk about managing interdepartmental organization activities. Remember, 5 functions of management: planning, organizing, influence, and control. I'm sorry, 4 functions: planning, organizing, influence, and control. I used to give 5, but now it's 4. So what do middle managers do? What are middle managers? They're in the middle of that structure. What do middle managers do? They don't supervise anymore, which is a control function. They're not yet senior level managers, which is a planning function. So what do? They organize. Where do they organize? They organize among the other departments within the organization, and that's called interdepartmental organization. And it involves prioritizing and coordinating activities between their departments and other departments. And I give you a representation of that. This was brought about by a person who was named Bill Unken, who was the author of Management Time, How to Get the Monkey Off Your Back. Anyway, I give you Figure 6.4 from his writings, And it shows you an example of one individual manager. I use in this case a front office manager and his or her staff, and I put that in a bubble. And then we list the other bubbles, we chart the other bubbles that are directly on that front office manager's bubble. And interestingly enough, we call that bubble management, the bubble management model, which was originally called the nucleus management model. So how does a person practice bubble management? Well, you've probably heard of somebody, you know of anybody who did a favor for someone and expected a favor in return? Well, bubble management operates very much the same way. It involves, number one, establishing strong relationships with the heads of the other departments who are on your bubble. And the second thing is to establish a bank account, not a real bank account, an interrelational bank account with other departments. And the goal is to continually deposit in that bank account by doing favors for other department heads, so that when the time comes, they'll willingly do favors for you. I've seen this in organizations. It will make or break a department head on the types of relationships he or she has with other department heads. I've witnessed former Marriott managers who didn't understand this concept and would alienate people in other departments. Those of you who work in a front desk, you know that you rely heavily on engineering and housekeeping. And I would watch these Marriott department heads alienate those people that they need to be successful, and they would end up not staying with the organization. Why? Because those people actually undermined those managers. Is that right? No. But does it happen? Yes. So the goal of bubble management is to have strong interrelations with the heads of all of the departments that you require in order for you to be successful. So I explain the whole concept to you. I talk about organizational currency, which is in the form of interrelations and working with other people, doing favors for other people. Remember, to give is to receive. So those individuals that you help out, you can count on them to help you out in the future. And I go on to talk to you about organizational systems and work unit systems. Again, I give you visual representations. These are very important to understand, for you to see what goes on in these work units. And I give you an example in Figure 6.5 of a culinary work unit. And you can see the progression. And again, what model does it follow? The same model we talked about in Chapter 5. It's the production model, which is what we use to chart productivity interventions. And so you can see it from that standpoint. You also learned in the last chapter that the culinary, within most of our sectors, and I talk heavily about the lodging sector because I worked most of my time in large-scale resorts. We don't have very many departments that produce an actual physical product. In most cases, the departments are producing functions such as maintenance, distribution, and those types of things. And so we're in the services type of business. But the one exception to that rule is a culinary department. And so it's nice to chart so that we can see the products actually being developed. And who's the delivery system in this case? It's the service staff. So I give you another map of departmental systems. In this case, I'm talking about a restaurant production system model, including distribution, maintenance, and repairs. And it follows the model, back of the house, front of the house, all the way to the guest interactions. And then in Figure 6.7, we give you a senior manager's viewpoint of a production system. And they have a totally different view. Why? Because it's a bigger view. And they're not that into the actual micro or details of your work unit's organizational production. And I go on to talk to you about enterprise systems and corporate systems. and then I give you a chart on functional input systems and outputs. Again, everything you do in management, other than the people relations stuff, everything you do in management is all from inputs, systems, and outputs. That's what the scientific management people gave us. They gave us an engineering approach to management. We don't follow their rules because we're not in the business of being ultimately efficiency oriented, because why? We understand in today's thinking, in systems thinking, we understand the balance between efficiency and effectiveness. And as you know, efficiency is doing things right, and effectiveness is doing the right things. You can do things right, but do the wrong things, no good. You cannot do things right, but do the right things, no good. Because either way, you don't have that balance between efficiency and effectiveness, and that's what gives you profit, and that's what adds value to your work area as well as your organization. I go into a long discussion about that, and I describe it quite extensively for you. And again, hopefully you'll read it and see it from the perspective of a person in a larger position than you may be in today, and it will serve you in the future. As I said before, you want to save this information and use it as a reference material when you get that first office of yours. Put it on your bookshelf. We're out of time. See you in the next